But our success as a company comes in the understanding that there's not a one-size-fits-all for supply chain solutions. That we work with many different customers across different industries. In fact, 8 distinct verticals. Retail vertical is a key one, a dynamic one within the company. And we work very hard listening to our customer needs and trying to understand what they're looking for, what they need, and building logistics platforms to actually meet those needs. And as a company, we'll invest people, time, resources, and even equity, even put in dollars into a program for a specific customer and a specific program, certainly a key account. And so, based on my experience with the company, led to some remarks I made last year. I did speak last year at Deliver America, and I just talked about navigating the future of retail supply chains and what the future looks like. And so this year, in my short talk, about 30 minutes, I'd like to build upon what that is, and just talk about the environment today, the uniqueness of this year, what I view to be a strong demand in the marketplace. Some may not agree with that, but I'm seeing strong comp sales in the US. I'm seeing globally strong growth overall. I'll talk about that. I've got some data to share on that. But we're all operating in retail today in a 24/7 environment. And that is, we're online, and it's 24/7, and I'll call it an always-on economy. So you'll hear me say an always-on economy. That's sort of what I'll talk about a little bit. And how we can all work together to be a bit more responsive in retail. All right, the good news is that it's a feel-good slide. It wasn't always the case in retail. Sometimes there was recession and sometimes there were soft years, but we're in a growth mode right now. There's growth, demand is strong. Some may not agree, but I got some data to share with you. But overall, global sales is strong, and actually the consumer continues to consume. So why is that? Well, they may buy, depending on geopolitical events, or I'll say high cost inflation, they may buy differently. They'll buy more essentials versus, I'll say, discretionary. But still, overall, the consumption is up. But also, in many parts of the world, there's a higher standard of living, so that's driving retail consumption. But more so, I believe it's technology. It's the platforms, the tools that we have available, that the retailers have made available to the consumer. And the consumer has adapted so well and so easily to these tools. It's just think about the mobile commerce, right? Think about the different models, BOPIS, buy online, pick up in store, click and collect, virtual reality. All these tools accelerate retail activity and accelerate e-commerce. And so e-commerce is a growth factor within retail, and I'll talk to you about it a little bit in a few slides. So there's a company called IHS Global Insights out of Boston, and they went on to say, they've come out with a forecast that global retail will achieve a staggering number, about 49 to 50 trillion in the next 5 years, by 2030. That's pretty impressive, right? But if you take a step back and you look at the whole decade, we started out in the end of 19, just before COVID started, we had a robust retail environment, and that was 26 trillion at that time, global sales. And so we're talking about over the course of this decade, what's happening is the business will basically double in 10 years. And so pretty exciting is what's happening. And of course, the number one retail market is the US. We're a $7 trillion cap. China's number 2. Asia, certainly Asia Pacific, is a growth area, growth region, so that's growing. But in the big market, the US retail market, there's some significant milestones that we hit and we achieved. So I don't want to talk too much about last year. I'd rather talk about today and going forward, but just to highlight, last year's holiday season, actually US retail sales achieved just under $1 trillion, $996 billion in sales in that holiday period from November to December. So pretty strong numbers. But more interesting than that was this conversion to online. And every year we know it goes 17, 18%, but actually last year in 24, it was 25% of total sales was online. And of that, more than 50% was the use of the phone. In fact, 52% was mobile commerce. So market's growing, demand is strong, and e-commerce continues to be a driver of growth within retail. So there's a lot of studies that support that, a lot of research, and hopefully we agree that that's the case. This slide has a lot of data, but I don't want to kill you with too much data. I'll just take your eyes to the bottom slide, to the very bottom row here, visuals on that. That again is a forecast by IHS Global Insights and also Euromonitor. And they're forecasting that e-com sales will grow. That yellow circle that you see there, that's the giant retailers. And that will grow, the giants, the Walmarts, the Best Buys, the Targets, the Home Depots, they're going to grow their e-com, their online business up compounded average growth rate 20% by 2030. So significant growth. And then you pull those guys out and you just look at retail in general, that's that blue circle, that's 12.5% growth rate. That's just retail in general will grow a compounded average growth rate by 2030. And then the red circle, that's actually fulfilling out of the stores. Even that, 4% growth. So overall, e-com is up, market demand is strong. And so in order to support this, I'll say, trajectory and growth, it requires logistics support in the form of strong fulfillment and delivery services. In fact, in this always-on environment, this 24/7 always-on economy, it really requires strong fulfillment and delivery services. In fact, nowhere is it more important than peak times, peak seasons, peak holidays. You know, a Valentine's Day, a Mother's Day, of course, critical holiday. Prime Day in July, we saw big growth there. Back to school, of course, and of course the holiday season. In fact, the parcel guys this year, they're forecasting that the market is going to be up another 5% over last year's strong numbers. So that's UPS and Federal Express, and they're saying the business will be up 5%. So that's about 2.4 billion packages and parcels that they will deliver and fulfill over the course of this short window in November and December. And of course, I believe retail or the technology is spurring retail activity, and as such, e-com sales will be up, online sales will be up. And of course, I see Tony sitting in the office here, in the audience here. But as online sales goes up, of course, the returns will go up as well. It's just it's a phenomenon, right? Now, an in-store purchase, data says that a return rate for in-store is 5%. And Tony mentioned last year in his presentation, and I talked to him a couple of days ago, he says for online sales, the return rate is actually 3, maybe 4x right now. So we're talking about 17, 18% return rate for online sales. So this season we'll see growth in online sales, we'll see growth in returns. And so as an industry, it's important that we sort of triage a solution on good fulfillment and returns that we're ready for the season to minimize waste and cost and I'll say delays. So this year, interesting development. I mean, in the global environment of retail, a lot of factors. Last year we dealt with geopolitical events in terms of the Red Sea and delays, and certainly climate change and climate events. And this year has been more of regulatory. But what we're seeing here is sort of managing growth under pressure. And this year has been less about just in time and more about just in case. And so DCs and warehouse networks have been full or have had a higher utilization this year or earlier than before, and that's because of the stock up that's been going on. And this is no surprise to any of us, but what we're seeing here and what we saw is really this inventory front loading. Retailers decided, partially was the Red Sea and the delays around the Red Sea, but more so it was the tariff issues. So the regulatory environment. In fact, I counted, there were 12 tariff events that happened from February to the end of April. And today we had some good news. Mr. Trump was in South Korea and he met with President Xi, and so they've come to some agreements, so that hopefully settles things down. But what the retailers did is they shifted their retail strategy, and something I haven't seen in many, many years, they brought product in early, sort of a just in case, so an about face in the retail strategy. And this has been validated by a couple of illustrations. For example, there's Gene Soroka, he's the executive director at the Port of LA, he's a friend, ex-colleague, and a good spokesman for the port, and he went on record saying that July was the strongest month on record in the 117-year history in the Port of LA. In fact, the average volume of US ports, all US ports, is between 2.3 and 2.5 million TEUs coming in per month. Port of LA did over 1 million in the month of July. And his comment, he went on record as saying, the holiday season has arrived early. And then there's Jonathan Gold, who's a great spokesman for the NRF, and he went on record as saying June was strong, July was strong. August was the first time we saw a decline year over year, 3%. September, about 6 to 7% decline. This month, we're not done yet, but it's forecast to be 12 to 13% decline over last year. Next month, November will be 19% decline, and December even worse. And so what that tells us is that inventory came in early, the volumes are off second half. So first half strong, second half, okay. So the product's in landed, products in the DC networks, and it really sort of bloated networks, I'll say sooner. I spoke to the Chief Supply Chain Officer at Williams-Sonoma, Brent Kozlow, and this is 2 months ago, and I asked him, how are things going? And he said his warehouse network was full, DCs were full, and the whole focus was on sell-through. So they're trying to create some incentives and some promotions to push product out into the marketplace. And this is Williams-Sonoma. They've had great results last year, great earnings results, first quarter this year, second quarter. Interesting, their high-end furniture, they have over a 60% rate of online sales. So most of their business is not in the store now, it's now shifted to online. But again, he was saying they're trying to push that out. And it wasn't just Williams-Sonoma, it's really most of the retailers had product in early, they filled their networks, and they're trying to get it in the marketplace. And I think this year we're seeing holiday season, we're always shocked. Hey, holiday goods are in the marketplace already. The trees are up. Well, this year, I believe we saw that earlier. So not that it's bypassing Halloween and Thanksgiving, but we've seen holiday product in the marketplace a lot sooner than we normally do. And of course, that's just a phenomenon of this year. So in the past, we talked about peak seasons, getting ready for surge peaks, and even when the market was soft, a flash peak. And this year, the new norm has really been no peak. And I wasn't sure about today, but based on what happened in South Korea, let's hope things normalize and next year will be kind of back to normal. Flexibility. So the retail environment, retail supply chains are global. Retail is sourced from thousands of miles away in Asia, and they sell thousands of miles away in the US and to Europe and their other markets. And as a result, their supply chains are extended. And more than anybody else, they're highly exposed to external factors. And those are geopolitical events that happen, and we saw that with the Russia-Ukraine conflict, certainly the Houthis and what they did in the Red Sea and adding 2 weeks to the transit time because of rerouting around the Cape of Good Hope. Climate change, what happened with the Panama Canal, the drought that backlogged the canal that caused delays and cost increases in the supply chain. Certainly the hurricanes in the South Atlantic last year, and so unfortunately that affected our neighbors and fellow citizens in North Carolina and Florida, but all that really has an impact. And also the complexity of being able to operate and sell in different markets. There's trade barriers, there's complex rules and regulatory issues. And that was the event that happened here in the US. Certainly more, other markets, but more so in the US. So the global environment sort of fell into all the tariff changes in the US, and of course, that created disruption for the retailers. And so that really creates an environment, the need for flexibility. So flexibility is not only key, it's a necessity. DP World, we just completed a study. We're going to publish this next week. We went ahead and surveyed retail leaders of key retail companies, and we asked them what are they looking for in terms of their supply chain, their partners, and what are the qualities and characteristics. And 83% of retail leaders said they want their partners to deliver reliably, with responsiveness, with scalability, to be able to scale up and meet unpredictable demand and also unforeseen disruptions and events. And they're looking for disruption management. They want companies deeply invested in disruption management, be able to help them through these circumstances. Now, I won't call it crisis management, but disruption, right? Crisis is at another level. And so the statement was made is, I'm looking for my partner. When my business is on fire, or my platform's on fire, and my business is severely affected, and there's a sudden change in policy, I need my partner to be in this with me and to help me preempt the risk, and to adjust and adapt at a moment's notice, to pivot immediately and be able to help them. And so retailers are looking for their partners and their operators to have strong networks, global networks, to be more strategic and to help them meet and drive demand across their continents and channels and across their supply chains. DP World, our network from a freight forwarding standpoint, we operate over 90% of the world's trade lanes. So we understand we've got this extensive network and we understand how we can flex this and bring flexibility into the equation. In fact, this year we were asked to do a lot of different things. I'm going to call them, I'll start with war stories, but they're actually, I'll say they're good stories. But this year we were asked to hold product at origin because of the tariffs. We were asked to reroute product, actually expedite, to do mode changes from air to ocean. We did a lot of different things this year. And it wasn't just DP World, I'm sure it was other logistics providers. They were being asked by their customers to do many different things. So the industry had to flex up. And so that was very, very important. In fact, there's a couple examples come to mind. One strong, large specialty retailer in the US, they had a significant amount of production going on in India. The India tariff was about to increase, it actually doubled. And so they asked us last minute, can you do a mode change from ocean to air? And we air freighted incredible amount of product over the course of a week's time span over different air freighters. And we brought it in, landed it, and cleared it. And it was hours before that August 27th, 50% tariff went into effect out of India. So the customer was happy, obviously. Great, great feel-good story. But it wasn't just us. I think other providers also had similar experiences. There's a case study up here. It's now baked in. It's a story that happened, but a multinational retailer, we helped them shift 30% of the sourcing out of Asia to the US. To get around that, we shifted it to Latin America, to Turkey and Portugal. And in that process, we helped them take a couple weeks of lead time out of the supply chain. But more than that, we helped them salvage about 5 million euros in sales. So a great story, and a lot of I'll say we all had to work together to sort of respond to this environment. So it really emphasizes the need for flexibility. Not only is it's a critical factor, right? It's a driver within the business today. So last couple of years, we talked a lot about visibility. Certainly, we talked about end-to-end supply chain visibility. We talked about the moment it gets booked at origin or product is received, to even last mile visibility. And then we talked about real-time visibility, and then we talked about exception management, right? But actually visibility is sort of table stakes today. It's just an entry to the game. Retailers need to have more than be able to see where their product is. They need to be able to react and respond in a timely fashion when circumstances change. And so that really sets the stage for control towers. And they've been around for a while. I was having a conversation with one gentleman last night, and he was telling me the terminology is shifting from control towers to orchestration. But these control towers have been around for a while. But they're real-time platforms that go beyond visibility and tracking a product, and they actually allow a retailer to be able to act timely based on data that's available today. So I was reading the last couple of years, I was reading the last couple of weeks about different control towers in different industries. I was reading about the automotive sector and what they look for from a control tower orchestration standpoint, what they need, what they want. The tech industry is big within DP World, so I was reading about that. I was also reading about the control towers for the defense industry. And of course, control towers are deployed certainly within the retail environment. They've been for a couple of years. And this is part of our DP World's go-to-market strategy as well as control towers. So control towers bring overall a higher level, or say a better level of forecasting, rerouting, reoptimization, and based on live data, real-time data, across customers, vendors, suppliers, and their channels, across the carriers and the logistics modes. Accenture came out with a great study not too long ago, and they talked about those companies that use control tower intelligence are actually achieving some real tangible results. For example, a 1% improvement or bottom line impact on revenue and on sales. That's pretty good. And then when it comes from a transportation standpoint, despite all the expediting and the rerouting and reoptimization and mode changes from ocean to air, still control towers are realizing and eking out a 3 to 5% savings in overall transportation costs. And then also a highlight is that they're also realizing an improvement, 10 to 20% improvement in labor efficiencies. So that was Accenture. And Capgemini did a similar study, read that last week, and their study had some similar conclusions, but they also said control towers are able for customers to realize a 15 to 20% reduction in product shortage. So some real benefits. And so at DP World, our go-to-market, we do go-to-market with a control tower deployment, and we also back that up, or I say augment that with AI and automation. And we're layering this into our networks, from a control tower deployment to, I'll say, digital twin technology for modeling disruption, to predictive algorithms that allow us to decide where to move product next, to AI autonomous robotics that we use and deploy in our warehouse network. So this is an area that we're investing in. And other companies too, the industry is investing. Automation, certainly such a tremendous amount of innovation going on. I mean, even in the show, you're hearing new concepts going on. But what I'm seeing and what I'm reading in the research is there's so much new automation going on, and certainly with artificial intelligence, AI. And I'll say in retail, there's a lot of hype. There was a lot of hype around AI. Even last year's show, or the conference, I still didn't hear of a story, a good testimony I could sink my teeth into that AI was working in retail. That was last year, but this year, over the last year, I'm seeing a tremendous amount of examples, applications of demand-driven planning, crunching in retail, crunching huge amounts of data quickly, efficiently, and the output of that. Just higher levels of efficiency over repetitive tasks, both on returns, on demand planning, on consumption over certain categories and sales. And so there's just so many great examples. Even within our own network, we have as linear as AI-mounted cameras on our forklifts that travel around our warehouse and study that process and then report back and creating more efficiencies in terms of warehouse operations. So many great examples happening. So retailers today are deploying smart robotics, AI-driven demand planning, and they're reporting some real results. For example, Amazon. So Amazon bought Kiva in 2012. And today Amazon I believe, is the largest user and procurement and operator of autonomous robotics in the world. I don't think there's anybody that's second to them. Maybe, but I don't believe so. And so they deployed recently their latest generation autonomous robotics into a number of warehouse sites. And they're reporting they're getting a 30% cost reduction in the cost of fulfilling an order. Now think about Amazon, think about their size, their network, and the amount of packages. Think about what 30% is doing, right? Amazing. There was a company, a medical supply company, will remain unnamed, but they had a big spike, as an example, they had a big spike in their orders, like 3x in a very short window, and so they leaned on their 3PL partner who had autonomous robotics, and they ramped those up and they were able to fulfill, meet the demand with minimal impact on their labor. And a cool example of this company, Verity is based in Switzerland. They're an inventory management and planning organization, and their model is they deploy autonomous drones to their customers' warehouse networks. And so the drones will travel around, will scan product, UPC, pallet locations, and actually provide almost near real-time visibility at an accuracy level, inventory accuracy level of 99.9% at 100% reliability. So fantastic model. And their customers very pleased. In fact, one highlighted, one great story. They said within a quarter's time, these autonomous drones were able to find 25,000 misplaced items in their warehouse network, and that was an immediate hit to their bottom line that quarter, the revenue impact, and they didn't have to write that product down. Anyways, a lot of investment in AI, a lot of investment in automation, and that's part of the expectation today. What we're seeing today is really the growth of demand. Stats prove that. We're seeing certainly spikes of these retail leaders and their programs and how they're growing. And so they're really investing from an automation and an AI standpoint into their programs, and that's helping basically to be a brand differentiator for them. Again, I cite Amazon and Amazon's growth. This July, they had a 4-day Prime Day, and they grew 10% over last year's record sales. But it wasn't just Amazon, it's the Walmart, the other retailers mobilized around it. So Walmart was up, Best Buy, Target. In fact, in that 4-day period, the industry was up 30% over last year, and in that 4 days sold $24 billion worth of product. So the proof is in the numbers, the timing, the need for a lot of this investments is happening. You have Adobe Products, they're forecasting this season on online sales is to be up 5.3% over last year. So again, the need for investment to be able to handle this type of activity. There's a couple of good examples about retailers making the investments and building that into their brand promise. Marks & Spencer's, which is a UK retailer, department store retailer, they did a joint venture with Ocado Foods back in 2019. And their business was actually suffering from a department standpoint. We understand what's happened to department stores, and they were experiencing the same phenomenon. they invested in this joint venture with Ocado Foods, and it totally transformed their business. They brought that traffic in for food, as big retailers have done. And so recently they made a decision to invest 340 million pounds into a highly automated food distribution network and capability in the UK that is a huge unlock for their food business and will double that over the next couple of years. So pretty amazing. And then Inditex, which is Zara, which is a key customer of DP World's in the retail sector, they made an investment last year, 900 million euros in 24 and 900 million euros this year to actually expand their logistics capacity to capture global opportunities. So again, we're seeing retailers in many ways really, again, embrace the automation, the innovation, and certainly in the investments to help support the growth of their business. So I'll end my short talk this morning and I'll just say thank you for your time. Again, in this world of, the retail world of, I'll say the global disruptions and climate events and all these things that can happen, certainly there's winners and losers in this environment. And I believe actually that the winners this year and going forward are not the ones who are going to be the fastest or not the ones who are going to be the cheapest. It's the ones who are the most adaptive. It's really who can pivot on a moment's notice. Those are the ones designing their logistics program to meet this fluid demand of this always-on economy, but is also able to meet these spikes of unpredictable growth and unpredictable, I'll say, unforeseen disruption. And so those companies that view their logistics platform and their program as engines of resilience to support growth. And so retail supply chains are evolving, and the more fluid and flexible and resilient your program is, the more value you're bringing to your customers and the stronger your customer relationships. So I'll end by saying in this world of constant change, it's those companies that have a mindset and a culture of flexibility and adaptability will indeed have a competitive and strategic advantage that will allow them to be much more successful in the marketplace. Thank you for your time, and I'll take any questions that you may have.